Was the Rwanda plan our last hope of stopping the boats? The former Home Secretary James Cleverley, who, by the way, is now a Tory leadership hopeful, has launched a blistering attack on Labour's Yvette Cooper earlier today after she claimed that the now scrapped Rwanda plan cost the taxpayer £700 million.
Well, the figures that the Home Secretary used at the dispatch box yesterday were nonsense. And the problem that she's got, she seems to forget that it was only a few weeks ago that I was the Home Secretary. So I know exactly how much money has been spent on Rwanda. And at the point that the election was called, it was just shy of 300 million. 700 million figure, complete nonsense. The fact is that controlling our borders is never free, and the cost of inaction will be considerably higher.
Cleverley's intervention comes just days after the Refugee Council warned that Labour's decision to allow small boat arrivals to claim asylum could see 70,000 migrants remaining in the UK. And it didn't take long for Suella Braverman to stick the boot in on that decision. Here she was, speaking on LBC earlier today.
That says an amnesty. That says, doesn't matter how you got here. Doesn't matter if you broke our rules. Doesn't matter if you played our system. If you're not a genuine refugee. Doesn't matter how you came to the country. We're going to let you stay here. I think that's a bit worrying, personally. I think that's flashing the green light to the people smugglers. I think that's saying that Britain is open.
And so it begs the question, was the Rwanda plan our last hope of stopping the boats? Let me know your thoughts. Head to gbnews.com/your say or tweet us at GBNews. And do vote in the poll. I'll bring you the results shortly. But first, going head-to-head on this are the political commentator Andy Williams and the former Conservative MP Ranil Jayawardena. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
If you object to the Rwanda plan, and if you were somebody that wanted it scrapped, you're not serious about stopping the boats, are you?
I think there are alternative ways. I mean, firstly, I think the Rwanda plan was a very expensive gimmick. I think manifestly it didn't work and wasn't going to work if it had been pursued. I don't believe it was the deterrent that it was claimed to be. And we have to take an alternative approach. And it might sound boring and it might sound nebulous, like lots of things Keir Starmer is saying. But actually, I think there are two really important things here. One is closer cooperation with our European allies is incredibly important.
Good luck with that.
Well, it's not going to be easy, but I think we've already seen some very early green shoots of progress at the EPC Blenheim Palace last week. And secondly, there is something about stopping this problem at source. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be easy and it might even fail, but surely it's worth a go. Saying there is some deterrent where there was no evidence for it, I just don't think that was going to be viable.
Andy, do you think that the Irish Taoiseach is a liar?
No.
Because he's on record as saying the Rwanda plan was working before it even started, because migrants were avoiding the UK altogether and going straight to mainland Republic of Ireland.
Well, I'm sure that's a handful of people who were going straight to mainland Republic of Ireland.
It was in the hundreds.
But there was still, it may have been in the hundreds, but the numbers of people coming across on small boats was going up and up and up. Now, you may say there wasn't time for the plan to take effect, but, you know, it was already there in the pipeline. Flights were about to get off. Why the election was called before that happened, I don't know. That's a different question.
Lovely to see you, Ranil. Welcome back to the show. Listen, it was an expensive farce, wasn't it, the Rwanda plan? A £700 million white elephant.
Not at all. I mean, if you look at what happened in Australia, where they did something very similar, it acted as a deterrent and it stopped people coming in small boats to Australia. Now, I think from the Labour Party, not only is Keir Starmer nebulous, not my words, but also...
That's a polite word.
But also, I think this is not only bad government, but bad politics. Bad government because they've now got no plan to really properly deal with this threat of small boats coming across this summer, but bad politics, because even if they believed it wouldn't work, they've not given it a chance to be proven wrong. We would have kept it going. We would have proven that it was right, and they've not given us the chance.
Here's somebody that didn't believe in the Rwanda plan, and that was the former Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. That's why he called a snap election, because he knew those flights wouldn't go off in July.
Well, I personally regret that there was an election in July. I personally would have either gone earlier in May, when there was elections across the country, or gone later in November. But I don't think you can say he didn't believe in it, because he was the one who absolutely was putting all the resources of the government behind making it happen.
If he was convinced Rwanda would have worked, then he'd have gone to the country in October or November, by which time he'd have stopped a significant number of the boats.
Well, I think what he did do was legislate so that the courts couldn't stop it, because you've got to remember the lefty lawyers stopped it before, aided by people who Keir Starmer is very close to.
Listen, Andy, here's the issue with Rwanda. I said earlier that if you're against it, then you're not serious about stopping the boats. The alternative is laughable, isn't it? It's more of the same. I mean, this command, which is going to stop, break up these gangs internationally, they're abroad, they're mobile. They have planes, trains, automobiles. They're impossibly hard to detect. The EU are already trying to do that and failing abysmally.
Complex problems require complex, multifaceted solutions, and the Rwanda plan was a one-trick pony. It was based on an idea that hadn't been proven. I know, Ranil, you say that it worked in Australia, but it's a different context. And I think what you need is European cooperation. You need to build relationships with European leaders and get a deal with the EU.
Europe is struggling by itself.
Absolutely.
So how does us joining the party help us?
Well, I think
they're already overwhelmed with migrants to a much greater extent than us, and then they're the answer.
They're copying our idea.
They are overwhelmed with migrants, but actually this is not something that's going to go away. Unless you did something that, in my view, would be beyond the pale. If you took action that was so tough that it would be beyond the pale morally, I don't believe this is something that can be resolved on a state-by-state basis. It requires cooperation, collaboration and collective imagination.
Well, cooperation with the enemy, the EU, the group that we've just spent many years trying to extricate ourselves from. And of course, if you do a deal with the EU, they'll expect a reciprocal arrangement. We'll take up to 100,000 migrants anyway. Doesn't sound like a win to me. But here's the thing. A lot of people are focused on the money. I would argue that given that the accommodation costs for the people that have already entered the country illegally is about £3 billion a year, that's more than the previous government's levelling up budget, I would say it's money no object. I think if Rwanda cost £1 billion or £2 billion or £3 billion, it's still worth the money if it works.
If it worked. But it wasn't going to.
Why did Keir Starmer say he'd scrap it even if it did work? I mean, you've got more sense than him, haven't you?
Well,
I mean, if Rwanda worked, would you support it?
We shall see. If it worked, yes,
right.
but why
don't we give it a chance?
Because I think it was manifestly obvious that it wasn't going to. You can't just say it will be a deterrent. We assume people won't come.
Mystic Meg capacity to see the future. The bottom line is that plenty of other EU countries are looking at processing asylum claims abroad, including the Danes and the Italians, I understand, Ranil.
Yeah, exactly. Across Europe there has been a problem. They've not been very effective at dealing with it themselves in their own way, working together, and all of those platitudes that we hear from the left. But actually, copying our idea, they are now seeking to make proper progress.
10 or 11 EU nations seriously looking at processing.
I always know GB News is well informed.
Oh, well, there you go. OK, but Andy, you get the last word. Go for it.
I just think, I come back to the point about collaboration and cooperation. This is not something that can be resolved on a one-by-one basis. It's really complicated, and we need to give something else another go. And actually, tackling it is complicated, and tackling the problem at source by, as Keir Starmer would say, smashing the GANs. There's no guarantee it will work, but it's worth a go.
We're going to get in trouble with Lucy, but is it complicated? Because actually, what should happen is that if you enter the country illegally, you will never be granted asylum.
Exactly. And
if you enter the country illegally, that application will likely be processed somewhere else in another safe country. Two Tory policies that Labour have scrapped.
Well, as I say, I don't think it was a deterrent. There's no evidence whatsoever that it's a deterrent. Different context.
But it worked.
In Australia.
All right, well, listen, let me tell you, this show is all about opinions. What is yours? Was the Rwanda plan our last hope of stopping the boats? I think that was a great debate, wasn't it? Very balanced. But Shelley on X says no. The Royal Navy is. Why aren't they being used to defend our shores and our people? Mike says Rwanda was always a bad plan. The boats were always a distraction anyway to shield the government from the amount of legal migration that they are allowing. Andy nodding his head there. Carl on Your Say says Labour have just cost people loads of money by scrapping the Rwanda plan. Silly not even to give it a go, and your verdict is in. 68% of you agree that the Rwanda plan is our last hope of stopping the boats. 32% agree with Andy and say it was not.